Unaware the wife he called broke had just inherited $2 million, cheating husband threw $50 at her and forced her to leave for his lover. What she did next shocked him. Earlier that morning, Elena Anderson sat at her small kitchen table, turning a cream-colored envelope over in her hands. Pearson Associates, Estate Division. She opened it with careful fingers and read every line in silence. Estate transfer confirmation beneficiary, Elena M. Anderson. Total amount $2,000. Her late Aunt Marjorie had left her everything, savings, investments, $2 million in her name alone. It didn't feel real. Elena folded the papers back into the envelope, slipped it into her purse, and told herself she would think about it later. Later came that same night. He didn't just ask her to leave. Yet in the middle of their small rented living room, her husband Mark grabbed his wallet, pulled out a crumpled $50 bill, and threw it at her like trash. Elena stood by the bookshelf she once decorated with wedding photos and memories. Mark stood a few feet away, his eyes already cold, already somewhere else. "You're broke, Elena," he snapped. "This is more than you've brought into this house in months. Take it and get out." The money lay on the floor between them like an insult. Then came a knock. Mark yanked the door open. Sabrina stood there, young, dressed up, wearing the same kind of lipstick Elena had seen smeared on his collar. She looked past him into the home, her gaze landing on Elena with cool curiosity. "So," Sabrina said lightly, "is she finally leaving? I don't like waiting in the hallway." Mark stepped aside for her. Almost proud, he moved to stand next to his lover in his own doorway and looked back at his wife. "Yeah," he said, "she was just leaving. You heard her, Elena. Take the 50 and go. You're broke. I'm done carrying you. Sabrina and I have plans." He thought he was kicking out a broke, dependent wife. He thought she had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and nothing to her name. He thought he could stand beside his mistress and push Elena out of her own home like she was nothing. But what he didn't know was this. The woman he called broke had already inherited $2,000. The proof of it was sitting quietly in her purse as she walked out the door. That same night, alone in her parked car with the $50 on the seat and the inheritance envelope in her lap, Elena made a decision. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to stand. This isn't just a story about a cheating husband. It's about what happens when the quiet woman everyone underestimates finally uses the power she's been holding all along. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Elena's story be ignored the way Mark ignored her pain. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The thud came first, sharp, sudden, echoing through the small living room as if the whole house flinched. Elena Anderson, 32 years old, a quiet-natured woman who carried more emotions in her eyes than in her voice, jerked her head up from the bookshelf she was reorganizing. It wasn't a dangerous sound, it was the front door slamming, but the force behind it told the truth long before Elena even turned. Mark Anderson, 35, her husband of 8 years, walked in with the energy of a man already annoyed at the world. He loosened his tie with one rough pull, dropped his keys on the nearest table, and sighed like the very air around him irritated him. Mark had always been like this. Quick temper, quick judgments, quicker dismissals. Elena had once believed it was stress. Lately she was not so sure. She stayed still, her hand resting on a framed photo she was rearranging. The shelf around her was gentle and personal, a few books, sentimental keepsakes, and framed memories that still held meaning for her, even when everything else seemed to be slipping. She had been organizing them because she needed calm today, something steady to hold on to. This morning had not been ordinary. Hours earlier, before Mark came home, Elena had sat alone at their small kitchen table with a cream-colored envelope in front of her. The return address read, Pearson Associates Estate Division. Her heart had pounded as she opened it. Inside were thick official papers and a cover letter that made her vision blur for a moment. Estate transfer confirmation beneficiary, Elena M. Anderson. Total amount, $2,000. Additional assets, property holdings, investment accounts. She remembered reading the figure 3 times, her throat tight, her hands cold. It hadn't felt real. Pearson Associates had already spoken to her after Aunt Marjorie's funeral, had gently explained that her aunt had left her a substantial estate. But seeing the exact number in black and white, $2 million, had shaken her. She had folded the documents carefully, placed them back in the envelope, and tucked it into her purse. She told herself she would think about it later. Later when her chest stopped feeling so tight. Later when she could imagine a life that didn't revolve around Mark's moods. Now standing by the bookshelf, she felt the weight of that envelope like a secret pressed against her side. She set down the photo in her hand, their wedding picture, her smiling beside Mark, younger, hopeful, trusting. Next to it, she placed another picture, one she always kept close. Aunt Marjorie, the aunt who had raised her for several years and was the quiet guardian of her heart. Aunt Marjorie had passed away a few months back. Elena had spent evenings sorting through letters and old things. The law firm, the meetings, the documents. It had all felt distant. Today it became real. There was also a small card in a delicate frame, handwritten by Aunt Marjorie herself. To my dear Elena, you're stronger than you think. The words had carried her through many painful nights. Now with $2,000 written on legal paper in her purse, they felt like a challenge. Backstory woven in. Elena had grown up between two worlds, a fragile childhood with parents who argued more than they embraced, and moments of safety in Aunt Marjorie's home. When Elena was 12 after her parents split, she stayed with her aunt for almost 3 years. It was the only time she ever felt truly seen. Aunt Marjorie, who had no children of her own, had always whispered that she wanted Elena to have a life stronger and freer than the one she came from. When Elena turned 20, Aunt Marjorie began sending her letters every year. Soft advice, quiet warnings about trusting herself. When she became sick, she sent Elena a final message. One day you will need something more than love, and I hope I leave enough for you to stand. Elena hadn't understood then. Now, with Mark's footsteps heavy in the hallway, she did. Growing older, Elena worked simple jobs, lived modestly, and married Mark, believing that love, even when imperfect, could be fixed with effort. She put her dreams aside, supported Mark's ambitions, and overlooked his sharp tone because she believed marriage demanded patience. Mark's dismissiveness had grown worse in the past year. He treated her like she contributed nothing, like she had nothing, like she was nothing. He didn't know that on paper, she now had more than he had ever seen in his life. He didn't know, because she hadn't told him. Mark finally noticed her holding the frame. He scoffed. Why do you keep all this sentimental junk? We need space, Elena. There it was again, the tone. Not violent, not loud, just cutting, a trained blade. Elena lowered the frame slowly, refusing to let the sting show. They're important to me. Mark shrugged without caring. Yeah, well, emotions don't pay bills. He walked past her toward the bedroom, unbuttoning his shirt along the way. And that was when Elena saw it. A small smear, soft, pink, and sitting boldly on the collar of his white shirt. Lipstick, not hers. Her breath caught. Her hand tightened around the frame card. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark, what is that? Mark paused in the doorway. He turned his head just enough to see her staring at the stain. And then he smirked, an unbothered, slightly amused smirk. Don't start, he said. The tone was dismissive, not defensive. Confident, almost practiced. Her stomach dropped. Outside, through the window, Mrs. Green, their older neighbor who had lived on the block for decades and always sensed tension before others did, paused while watering her plants. She watched quietly, her eyes narrowing with concern. Elena didn't speak, but her silence hummed, a silence that meant she had seen something she could no longer unsee. On the coffee table behind them, Mark's phone buzzed once with a notification he ignored, screen lighting up with a name Elena did not yet know. The front door opened again, fast, sharp, too loud for a normal evening. It hit the wall, rattling a picture frame, yanking Elena out of her thoughts as if someone had ripped the floor from under her. Mark Anderson, 35, hurried inside with the energy of a man who already had somewhere else to be. His hair was slightly damp, his tie gone, his shirt half changed. He didn't greet her. He brushed past her without a glance and headed straight to the bedroom closet, pulling shirts aside, searching with the urgency of someone running late. Going out, he snapped, grabbing a dark blue shirt, one he usually saved for special places. Don't wait up. The intensity of his voice hit her before the meaning did. Elena, 32, soft-hearted and calm even in hurt, stood in the hallway doorway and watched him. With who? She asked quietly. It wasn't accusing, just a question. With friends, Mark said too quickly. He didn't look at her when he said it. He buttoned his shirt with nervous, practiced movements. Elena's eyes dropped to the collar of the shirt he tossed on the bed. The faint smear of pink was still there. Mark, she tried again, someone's lipstick was on your shirt. He rolled his eyes. You're overreacting. It was probably from a handshake or someone leaning in at work. You always make things bigger than they are. He'd said that line so many times it sounded rehearsed. She swallowed back the ache in her throat. She could have reminded him. She wasn't the one who needed anyone's money anymore. She could have told him that Aunt Marjorie's inheritance made her more than capable of walking away. But the words stuck. She didn't want to start a war tonight. Not yet. Mark's coldness wasn't new. He'd been coming home later, guarding his phone, dismissing her questions with the same casual cruelty. She'd chalked it up to stress, bad days, pressure. Now the lipstick said otherwise. He grabbed his cologne, the one he never wore around her anymore, and sprayed it once, twice. He checked himself in the mirror, smoothed his shirt, and finally headed for the door again. As he walked through the living room, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it, frowned, picked it up, and smirked. Perfect timing, he muttered under his breath. Elena watched from the hallway. Who's that? She asked. He slipped the phone back onto the table and grabbed his keys. I told you, friends. It was a lie. She could hear it. She could feel it. But she only said, okay, because she wasn't ready to explode. She wasn't ready to show him that she already had enough money to walk out and never come back. She was still the girl who believed love could be fixed with effort. The woman who had been taught to bend instead of break. Outside, Mrs. Green turned off her porch light, but lingered by the window, watching Mark step out in sharp clothes and polished shoes. She tilted her head slightly, thinking of the quiet woman who lived with him. Mark got into his car, started the engine, and drove away quickly. Back inside, the house fell into the kind of silence that made Elena feel both safe and haunted. She walked slowly to the couch and sat down. Her hands trembled in her lap. The bookshelf, the pictures, the soft card from Aunt Marjorie. All of it looked different now. The life she had built felt thin, fragile. A memory rose up without warning. Barista Mia, from the coffee shop near her job, bright-eyed, warm, always chatty, had once hesitated while making Elena's drink. I'm not sure if it was him, Mia had said softly, but I think I saw your husband yesterday. He was with someone. They looked close. Elena had laughed it off then. Probably someone from work, she'd said. But Mia's eyes had held pity, the kind people get when they see something someone else doesn't want to see. Back then, Elena chose not to see it. Tonight, with lipstick still in her mind, she couldn't unsee it. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Aunt Marjorie's words floated up. You're stronger than you think. She didn't feel strong. She felt tired. Tired of being talked over. Tired of being treated like she was broke when she knew, quietly, that she wasn't. And then, breaking the heavy silence, a soft ding. Her eyes opened. She turned her head. The sound came from the coffee table. Mark's phone. He'd forgotten it. Her heartbeat picked up. She stared at the screen as it lit up with a preview. A woman's name. A short message she couldn't fully read from where she sat. But one word stood out. Tonight. Elena froze. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Another preview. She won't know. Hurry! Her hand hovered in midair as she leaned forward, fingers trembling inches above the screen. Touching that phone would cross a line she had never crossed before. Her breath hitched. Her decision in that moment would change everything. The phone buzzed again, louder this time, vibrating against the wooden table as if demanding to be touched. Elena's hand moved on instinct. She grabbed the device before it could light up again, her breath rushing out in a shaky exhale. It was the first time in her life she had ever held Mark's phone without his permission. Her chest felt tight, as if the moment itself were too big for her lungs. The screen lit up, a 4-digit passcode. Her mind went blank for a second. Then it clicked. Mark used the same code for everything. His birthday. Her fingers trembled as she typed it in. The phone unlocked. What came next wasn't quiet. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't confusing. It was truth, raw, cold, ugly. A message thread sat at the top of the screen. A woman's name she had never seen before. Sabrina. The most recent messages glowed at the bottom. Sabrina. She won't know. Hurry. Sabrina. I'm tired of being your secret. When is she leaving? Elena's stomach twisted. Her thumb moved slowly, as if her body were trying to delay what her eyes were about to see. She scrolled upward. More messages, more confirmations, photos. Sabrina in tight dresses. Sabrina in Mark's car. Sabrina in a restaurant Elena had never been to. Receipts, dinners, drinks, hotel bookings, more than one. Her hand flew to her mouth. No tears came yet. The shock was too deep, sitting under her ribs like a stone. She forced herself to sit down before her legs gave out. The room seemed to breathe with her grief. The fridge hummed in the kitchen. A car passed outside. Somewhere a dog barked. Inside, everything else was silent. Memories slid into place one by one. Director Lewis, HR at Mark's company, at a work event months ago. A composed woman in her 50s with careful eyes. She'd approached Elena with a polite smile. Mark's been distracted lately, she had said gently. Everything all right at home? Elena had smiled back, embarrassed. Just work stress. Lewis had nodded, but the look in her eyes had been heavier than her words. Then Karen, Elena's co-worker, one of the few people she trusted. One evening as they closed up, Karen had said quietly, I think I saw Mark in the parking lot last week, with a woman. They looked close. I didn't want to assume, so I kept quiet. Again, Elena had brushed it off. He would tell me if something was wrong, she'd said, because Elena believed in loyalty, in marriage vows, in patience. Now, watching message after message from Sabrina line up on the screen, she realized it hadn't been something wrong. It had been a whole other life. The phone buzzed again in her hand. New message. Sabrina. Did you tell her yet? I'm not waiting forever, Mark. Elena stared at the text. Her throat felt tight. She could hear Aunt Marjorie's voice in her memory. One day you will need something more than love, and I hope I leave enough for you to stand. Elena had thought that day meant losing a job, or a health crisis, or some sudden emergency. She hadn't imagined it would be the day she learned her husband was planning to replace her. She scrolled to the latest hotel booking. Reservation. Tonight. Under Mark's full name. Her hand shook. Not because she was weak, but because this was the final piece her mind needed to accept what her heart already knew. She whispered to herself, barely audible, So this is who you are now. Her voice didn't crack. It sounded tired. Done. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Sabrina popped up. Sabrina, if you don't move her out, I will. I'm not sharing you forever. Elena's chest tightened. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan. And somewhere out there, Mark's car engine roared through the night, carrying him toward a woman who wanted Elena gone. The screen dimmed, then lit again. The time glowed at the top. The messages remained. Elena stared at the device in her hand. She had two things Mark knew nothing about: his secret life and her secret inheritance. One was destroying her. The other could save her. But she wasn't ready to move yet, not until she saw how far he was willing to go. The front door lock clicked. Mark was coming back. The door exploded open, so violently that the doormat folded and the picture frames rattled on the wall. Elena jerked upright from the couch, Mark's phone now resting on the table in front of her. She had placed it back there the moment she heard the key in the lock, her heart racing. Mark Anderson, 35, stormed inside with a fury she had not seen before. His steps were fast, angry, unsteady, like a man whose secret had been touched. His shirt was half untucked, his hair pushed back with shaking hands, and his eyes burned with misplaced rage. "Why?" he shouted, slamming the door behind him. "Is my phone here?" His voice cut like glass. Elena didn't move. She watched him with a stillness that scared him more than screaming ever could. Mark jabbed a finger at the phone like it was a weapon. "Sabrina thought I was ignoring her. Do you know how insane she went because you had my phone? Her heart stung at the name spoken out loud. He paced like a trapped animal, running a hand over his jaw. You went through my messages, didn't you? His voice dropped to a low, poisonous tone. Of course you did. You can't even stay out of my way. Elena stood slowly, her hands at her sides. Her voice was soft, steady, painfully calm. I saw everything, Mark. He froze, not with guilt, with annoyance, as if her pain were an inconvenience. And, he scoffed, folding his arms, what, you want me to cry? To beg? Grow up, Elena. You pushed me to this. Her brows lifted in disbelief. How did I push you to cheating? To lying? To having another woman? You contribute nothing, he spat. You're dead weight. I've been carrying this house alone. He stepped closer. His eyes hardened. You're broke, Elena. Completely broke. I'm done dragging a broke, useless wife on my back. The word broke landed like a slap. Her fingers tightened, but she didn't flinch. She could have said it then. 2 million. She could have thrown the number at him the way he was about to throw money at her, but she didn't. He moved to his wallet on the table, flipping it open with sharp, angry jerks. You want something? Fine. He pulled out a crumpled $50 bill and threw it at her. It hit her shoulder and fluttered to the floor between them. Here, he spat. This is more than you've brought into this house in months. Take it and get out. The cruelty was surgical, practiced, intentional. Her eyes followed the bill as it lay against the worn floorboards. She took in the scene slowly. The man she married, the room they shared, the humiliation that felt like it was burning her skin. And then, a knock at the door, sharp, confident. Mark didn't hesitate. He yanked it open. Sabrina stood there, mid-20s, glamorous, lipstick perfect. The same shade that had stained his collar. She glanced past him, her eyes landing on Elena with cool curiosity. So, Sabrina said lightly, is she finally leaving? I don't like waiting in the hallway. Mark stepped aside and let her into the home as if it were nothing. He moved to stand beside Sabrina, almost proud. Yeah, he said. This is Elena. She was just leaving. Sabrina's gaze roamed over Elena's empty hands, her pale face. There was no apology in her eyes, only slight impatience. Elena's chest felt tight, but her face stayed calm. Behind them, the $50 bill still lay on the floor. Mark jabbed a hand toward it. Pick it up. That's more cash than you see in months. You're broke, Elena. I'm done paying for someone who brings nothing. Elena bent, not in defeat, but with a strange, slow dignity. She picked up the crumpled bill, smoothed it carefully between her fingers, and set it gently on the table beside Mark's phone. She never broke eye contact with him. Her silence made him shift his weight. What are you staring at? He snapped. Go! Sabrina and I have plans. You don't live here anymore. Sabrina leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching like a spectator at a show. She'll be fine, she said casually. Didn't you say she has nowhere to go anyway? Mark laughed once, humorless. Exactly, she'll figure it out. Quiet ones always do. Elena turned away. She walked to the small hook by the door, took her purse and car keys. As she lifted the bag, her hand brushed Mark's phone. On instinct, half proof, half protection, she slipped it into her purse. Mark was too busy smiling at Sabrina to notice. She opened the front door. Outside, Mrs. Green stood on her porch, watering can frozen in midair. She had heard shouting and stepped out. Now she saw Elena walking out with a hollow expression, and behind her, Mark standing next to another woman. Behind Elena, Mark's voice boomed. That's right. Walk away. Since you're leaving anyway, might as well start now. Sabrina gave a little smirk from the doorway. Mrs. Green's eyes widened in horror. She had seen arguments before. She had seen bad marriages, but never humiliation this cruel. Never with the mistress standing in the hallway like a replacement. Elena stepped fully out and shut the door softly behind her, so softly it hurt more than a slam. Mrs. Green whispered, voice trembling with anger and disbelief. He has no idea what he just did. Her gaze dropped to Elena's purse, where a cream-colored envelope from Pearson Associates peeked out. $2 million and a lifetime of underestimation were walking away from his house. The car door slammed so hard it echoed down the quiet street. Elena stumbled into the driver's seat, her hands shaking as she tried to catch her breath. Her chest burned. Mark's words, "You're broke. You bring nothing. You don't live here anymore," stung more than the actual $50 he threw at her. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing fast, staring at the steering wheel. Then she looked down. She was still holding the crumpled $50, the same bill he used to cut her out of her own home. Her fingers clenched around it. With a strangled exhale, she dropped it onto the passenger seat. It landed beside her purse with a limp little bounce and stayed there, worthless. Her purse had slipped sideways during the chaos. It tipped over now, spilling its contents onto the car floor: lip balm, receipts, keys, a pen, and a cream-colored envelope. Elena stared at it. Pierce and Associates Estate Division. She swallowed hard. That same morning, she had opened that envelope at the kitchen table. She had seen the numbers, read the totals, and felt her mind float. $2 million, real, legal, hers, but she had been too overwhelmed to move, too used to shrinking herself, too used to depending on Mark's mood. She had folded the papers back inside, slid the envelope into her purse, and told herself she would think about it later. Later had arrived. Tonight, after her husband called her broke in front of his lover and threw $50 at her like trash. Her hands shook as she reached down and lifted the envelope. It suddenly felt heavier. She slid the documents out. The words were the same as this morning, but they did not feel the same. Estate Transfer Confirmation Beneficiary, Elena M. Anderson. Total amount, $2,000. Additional assets, property holdings, investment accounts. Her hands trembled, not from surprise, but from the weight of finally accepting what this meant. She was not broke. She was not stuck. She was not trapped in that house unless she chose to be. Another page slipped free, a handwritten note she hadn't fully read before. Her eyes fell on it now. Elena, this fortune is yours. Use it when you need to stand again. Use it when the world tries to break you. And remember, no one decides your worth but you. Aunt Marjorie. Her vision blurred. Tears came, not from Mark, not from the $50, not from Sabrina, but from the feeling that her aunt, gone from this world, had still reached into this night to pull her up. A soft sob escaped her chest, but it wasn't the sound of someone breaking. It was the sound of something shifting. Her breathing began to slow. Her shoulders dropped, then straightened. Her face, wet with tears, grew calm, focused. She folded the papers with care and slid them back into the envelope. She placed it gently on the passenger seat on top of the crumpled $50. Two pieces of paper. One meant insult. The other meant freedom. There was no comparison. Elena picked up her own phone. Her fingers hovered for a moment, then scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't used in years. Miguel Ramirez. Attorney, early 40s, strategic, calm. She'd met him at a work seminar once, years ago. He'd told the room, "There are people who think they're untouchable because the person they hurt is quiet. They forget quiet does not mean weak." She had remembered that line. She never thought she'd need him personally, until now. She pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Ramirez speaking. Elena's voice trembled, but it did not break. "Mr. Ramirez, it's Elena Anderson. I need legal guidance, urgently." There was a pause, the sound of recognition. "Elena, are you safe?" he asked. She looked around the empty car, the quiet street, the closed doors of the house she had just left. "Physically, yes," she whispered. "But my husband just threw me out of our home in front of his mistress. He's been using our joint account on her. And I've just inherited $2 million from my aunt." Ramirez went silent for a beat, then his tone changed. Steady, focused. "Elena, listen to me. With that inheritance, you have far more power than he thinks you do. You do not have to go back, and you do not have to walk away empty." Her hand tightened around the phone. "I don't want revenge," she said softly. "I want to stand. I want to be done being small." "That," Ramirez replied, "is exactly the kind of client I fight for. Do you have access to his phone or account messages?" Elena glanced at her purse. "Yes," she said. "His phone is with me. I've seen the messages, the hotel bookings, the transfers." Ramirez inhaled. "Good, that's evidence." Here's what we're going to do. I'll meet you first thing in the morning. Tonight, you go somewhere safe. There are motels nearby. Pay in cash if you can. Text me the address. We'll start with freezing access to your joint funds before he drains them. As if the universe wanted to underline his words, Mark's phone buzzed from inside her purse. She pulled it out. A bank notification slid across the screen. Transaction request. $15,000 pending authorization from joint account. Elena stared at it, her expression hardening. Ramirez's voice was steady on the other end. Elena, are you still there? Yes, she said quietly. He just tried to move $15,000 from our account. That confirms everything, Ramirez replied. We move fast. Tonight you protect yourself. Tomorrow, we protect your future. Elena ended the call and stared through the windshield at the house she had just left. Mark thought he had thrown out a broke, dependent wife. He had actually pushed out a woman with $2,000, his phone full of evidence, and a lawyer on her side. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, put the car in gear, and pulled away from the curb. The night was no longer just about betrayal. It was about strategy. The knock at the motel door sounded like a warning. Sharp, firm, too early for comfort. Elena flinched awake. She'd barely slept. The small room smelled of old detergent and tired air. Her purse sat on the chair beside the bed, heavy with two things that didn't belong to Mark anymore. His phone, her inheritance papers. She sat up, heart racing, and stared at the door. Elena? A calm voice called. It's Ramirez. Her breath left her in a shaky sigh. She climbed out of bed, smoothed her clothes, and opened the door. Attorney Miguel Ramirez, early 40s, dark hair, steady eyes, stepped inside carrying a briefcase and a laptop bag. He looked like the kind of man who could tear apart a life using only facts and never raising his voice. Elena, he said gently, closing the door behind him. We move now, before he moves again. She nodded. Okay. Ramirez set his things on the small motel table and opened his briefcase. Files, legal pads, a neat row of pens. Everything about him looked controlled. Did you bring his phone? He asked. Elena grabbed her purse, pulled out Mark's phone, and handed it over. I took screenshots last night, she said quietly. The messages, the hotel bookings, the transfers. I emailed them all to you, like you said. Ramirez tapped on his laptop. I received them. That gave me enough to file an emergency request first thing this morning. Emergency? Elena repeated. He nodded. To freeze your joint accounts temporarily so he can't empty them while you're shifting your life. We have to protect what's left of the marital funds before he drains them for Sabrina. Elena took a slow breath. Will the judge listen? Ramirez looked up at her. You came to me with proof of ongoing infidelity, proof of financial misuse, and a confirmed inheritance in your name. The law likes paper. You have paper. You also have a clean record and a clear story. Yes, I believe the judge will listen. A knock came again, softer this time. Ramirez opened the door. A man in his mid-50s stepped in. Gray beard, simple jacket, quiet eyes that seemed to measure everything in the room at once. Elena, Ramirez said, this is Samuel Dalton, private investigator. He's been looking into Mark for a while on a different case. When your name appeared in some of his notes, he connected it. Now he's here for you. Dalton nodded. Mrs. Anderson, I'm here to collect truth. His voice was low, steady. He placed a folder on the table and opened it. Inside were photos, some printed, some in sleeves. Mark in a hotel lobby with Sabrina on his arm. Mark handing a credit card to the front desk. Sabrina clinging to him, smiling. Timestamps matching nights he told Elena he was working late. Elena stared at the pictures. She didn't cry. She just felt confirmed. I started tracking him months ago for a workplace-related suspicion, Dalton explained calmly. Your husband likes patterns. Same woman, same hotel chain, frequent use of the same card. Ramirez added, and when you called me last night and said the name Sabrina, it clicked. Dalton already had images. We just needed your side and the financial details. As if on cue, there was one more knock. A man in his late 30s entered, wearing a button-down shirt and carrying a thin laptop case. Elena, Ramirez said, this is Daniel Owens, forensic financial investigator. He used to be a detective. Now he analyzes money for a living. Owens offered a small nod. Ma'am? He sat at the table, opened his laptop, and pulled out a printed stack of bank statements that Elena recognized. She'd given Ramirez permission to access her joint account records as a co-owner. These, Owens said, tapping the pages, are the last 6 months of your joint account. Lines of numbers, names of restaurants, hotel charges, ATM withdrawals. He slid one page forward. Here is yesterday's attempted transfer, $15,000 from your joint account to a secondary account he controls. It was flagged and held because the bank noticed unusual activity and then received the court order we filed this morning. So the freeze, Elena murmured, is in place, Owens finished. For joint marital funds. He can't touch them for now without going through the court. What he has already spent on Sabrina will show as waste. Elena's fingers curled around the edge of the table. So he tried to drain more, even after throwing me out. He assumed you were powerless, Ramirez said simply. He assumes loud equals strong. He hasn't met your quiet strength yet. Elena looked from the photos to the statements, then to the envelope from Pearson Associates peeking from her purse. And my inheritance? She asked. Can he use that? Can he take it? No, Ramirez said firmly. Your aunt's estate is yours alone. It's considered separate property. We'll make that very clear in court. Your money will not pay for his mistakes. Dalton closed his folder and then opened a second, thicker one. This, he said, is the part you haven't seen. Mark hasn't only been careless with you, he's been careless at work. He spread out a few documents. Internal emails forwarded anonymously, notes and photos of Mark leaving the office early during normal work hours. Ramirez explained, HR Director Lewis at Mark's company raised a quiet alert months ago. She suspected misuse of company expense accounts. Dalton started collecting. He didn't know you'd be part of this picture until last night. And now, Elena asked? Now, Ramirez said, we use everything. The affair, the spending, the workplace misconduct. We show the judge a pattern. Mark is reckless with money, marriage, and trust. Elena sank onto the edge of the motel bed. This is a lot, she whispered. Dalton's voice stayed gentle. It's a lot, but it's also clear. Owens added, you are not the problem in this story, Mrs. Anderson. He is. Ramirez closed his briefcase, leaving a small stack of documents out. This, where he said, is the emergency divorce petition and the request for temporary orders. It includes a motion to freeze joint assets and to grant you temporary control over what's left, plus exclusive right to your home while this is sorted, if you want it. He threw me out, Elena said. And today, Ramirez replied, we asked the court to order him to leave. Elena looked at the papers, then at the men in front of her. You really think we can win? She asked quietly. Ramirez met her eyes. He thinks you're the broke, helpless wife. He has no idea you walked out with $2,000, his phone, and a team fighting for you. Yes, Elena, I think we can do more than win. I think we can end his illusion. Dalton slid one last manila folder toward Ramirez. What's that? Elena asked. The documents we file at his workplace, Dalton said. HR already has questions. After they see this, they'll have more. Outside the motel room, cars passed. Life went on. Inside, Elena's old life was being taken apart piece by piece, and a new one was being built quietly in its place. Ramirez checked his watch. We need to go. I'll file this now. By the time he walks into work, his world will already be shifting. He stood, and so did Dalton and Owens. Elena rose last, clutching her purse with the inheritance envelope safe inside. Mark thought last night was the end. The conference room buzzed with easy confidence. Laughter bounced off the glass walls. Co-workers shuffled papers and sipped coffee, their eyes on the big screen where sales numbers flickered. Mark Anderson, 35, sat at the head of the table like he owned it. He leaned back in his chair, smirking, spinning a pen between his fingers. He still felt untouchable. Sure, Sabrina had texted him a dozen times last night. Sure, his wife had seen his messages. But he'd thrown Elena out. Sabrina was in his arms. The phone was back in his pocket. In his mind, the problem was solved. He had no idea his phone was actually in a motel room, and the one in his pocket was a replacement he'd grabbed from a drawer that morning. All right, people, he said, tapping the table. Let's run through this quarter's numbers. We're ahead, right? A few laughs, a couple nods. No one saw the tightness around his eyes. He was about to start when 3 sharp knocks hit the conference room door. Every head turned. The door opened. A delivery driver in his early 20s stepped in, wearing a company uniform and holding a thick, sealed envelope in a digital tablet. "Delivery for Mark Anderson," he said clearly. Mark frowned. "Now? I'm in a meeting. Just leave it outside." "Sorry, sir," the driver replied. "Signature required. Legal docs. I was told to hand it to you directly." The room went quiet. Mark forced a smile, ignoring the curious looks around the table. "Fine." He stood, walked over and scribbled his name on the tablet with a quick, irritated gesture. The driver handed him the envelope, nodded, and left. Mark returned to his seat, trying to shake off the discomfort. He tore it open. The first page nearly knocked the breath out of him. Divorce petition, Elena M. Anderson versus Mark Anderson, filed by attorney Miguel Ramirez. His name, her name, a case number. His grip tightened. He flipped the page. The next document wore a judge's stamp. Temporary order request. Asset protection. Joint marital accounts to be frozen pending hearing. Inheritance noted as separate property of Mrs. Anderson. His mouth went dry. "What is it?" someone whispered. Mark didn't answer. Under that was another document on his company letterhead. Notice of formal investigation. Employee Mark Anderson. From HR Director Catherine Lewis. Subject: misuse of company funds, time and resources. His heart pounded. He looked up and saw his co-workers staring, their eyes wide, curious, wary. "It's nothing," he muttered. "Just nothing." But his face betrayed him. He shoved the papers together and stumbled out of the conference room without another word. Whispers followed him into the hallway. He turned the corner and stopped. HR Director Lewis stood waiting, arms crossed, a folder in her hands. Her expression was calm but firm. "Mark," she said, "we need to talk." "I'm in the middle of something," he snapped, trying to regain control. "We have a meeting." "This is more important than your meeting," Lewis said. "Come to my office. Now." Her tone pulled the ground from under him. He followed stiffly, the envelope still in his hand. In her office, she closed the door and gestured to the chair. "Sit." He dropped into it, still clutching the papers. Lewis opened her own file and laid out several sheets. "These," she said, "are your company credit card statements from the last 6 months. They include charges at hotels that don't match your approved travel schedule, dinners charged as client meetings with no client names, and repeated absences from the office during billable hours." Mark's throat felt tight. "Those were work-related," he insisted weakly. Lewis tilted her head. "With who then? Sabrina Collins? Or your wife?" His blood ran cold. You don't know what you're talking about." She slid a printed photo across the desk. Mark, Sabrina, hotel lobby, time-stamped during his supposed office hours. "Mr. Dalton," Lewis said, "shared these with me when they overlap with internal concerns. You know Dalton, the investigator the company sometimes uses." Mark stared at the image. Lewis closed the folder. "We are opening a formal misconduct investigation. Effective immediately, your access card is suspended until this is cleared." She reached out and took his company badge from his shirt pocket. He sat there stunned. His job, his marriage, his money, all slipping. He clutched the envelope again, flipping to the last page of the divorce petition. His eyes landed on a line written clearly. "A hearing on temporary orders is hereby scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Tomorrow. So fast. His heartbeat roared in his ears. He stumbled out of Lewis's office, feeling the walls close in. He tried calling Elena, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He tried calling Sabrina. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. His chest tightened. A bead of sweat slid down his back. At the bottom of the petition, another line stood alone. "Further evidence and disclosures will be presented at hearing." He swallowed hard. "What evidence?" he whispered. But deep down he knew. His own secrets were coming back with witnesses. Tomorrow's courtroom would be scene 9. The sound of tires screeching cut through the quiet street as Mark's car jerked to a stop outside Sabrina's apartment building. He didn't even close the car door properly before sprinting toward the stairwell, divorce papers crumpled in his hand. He took the stairs two at a time, lungs burning, thoughts racing. She'll back me up. She'll tell them it's not that bad. She loves me. He reached her floor and froze. Her door was open. Boxes sat in the hallway. Clothes spilled out of half-zipped suitcases. A trash bag stuffed with hangers leaned against the wall. Sabrina? His voice cracked. He stepped inside and found her sitting on the living room floor, still in a loose t-shirt and leggings. Her makeup was smudged from crying. An empty wine glass lay tipped over beside her. She looked up when he entered. "Mark," she said, voice raw, "what did you do?" He dropped the envelope on her coffee table and rushed to her. "Baby, it's not what it looks like. I'm going to fix this. My wife is she's overreacting. She won't actually—" Sabrina cut him off with a bitter laugh. "You really don't get it, do you?" He frowned. "What?" She grabbed her phone from the couch and shoved it at him. "Read." He took it. "Bank alert. Payment failed. Bank alert. Transaction declined." He scanned through her messages. Her rent payment bounced. A shopping order failed. A hotel reservation she'd tried to extend was rejected. "The bank said there's some kind of legal hold on anything with your name on it," Sabrina whispered. "What exactly did your wife do?" Mark's heart dropped. "Elena doesn't have that kind of power," he snapped. "She's broke. She—" "Broke?" Sabrina repeated, eyes narrowing. "Then how did she get a lawyer who can freeze your accounts overnight?" He opened his mouth and closed it again. Sabrina stood, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Her movements were quick, angry. "I can't pay rent now, Mark. I can't pay anything tied to you. The check you gave me bounced. Do you know how humiliating that call from my landlord was?" "I'll fix it," Mark said, stepping closer. "This is temporary. I just need a few days, okay? Once this hearing is over." "A few days?" she snapped. "They froze your money, Mark. Your job is under investigation. Your wife is clearly not as weak as you said she was. And you want me to wait and see?" He reached for her hands. "You told me you loved me." "I loved the version of you who was in control," she shot back. "The one who could take me out, pay my bills, make me feel like I didn't have to worry. But that man is gone." She pulled her hands away. Fear rose in Mark's chest. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," Sabrina replied, grabbing her purse, "I'm not going to sink with you." She slung the strap over her shoulder and grabbed one of the smaller bags by the door. "Sabrina, don't do this," Mark pleaded. "Please, I need you. Elena is turning everything against me. You're all I have left." She stopped in the doorway and faced him one last time. "No," she said quietly. "You had a wife who stood by you when you had nothing. You threw her out. You had me when you had money. You lost that. The problem isn't Elena or me or your company." Her eyes hardened. "The problem is you." She stepped into the hall and walked away, heels clicking over the worn floor. Mark stood in the middle of the half-packed apartment, breathing hard, throat burning. He looked at her scattered things. The life he tried to build in the shadows was falling apart in front of him. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He grabbed it. "Bank alert. Joint account funds temporarily restricted pending. Court order. Joint account." He stared at the words. "Joint," he whispered. "Elena." His mind finally connected the dots. Her silence, her staying calm when she should have screamed, the firm lawyer's name at the bottom of the divorce petition. He stumbled back to his car and drove home, mind spinning. When he turned onto his street, he saw landlord Foster standing at their front door with a clipboard. Mark jumped out of the car. "What's going on?" Foster, late 50s, practical, turned to him. "Got a notice from the bank. The rent check you wrote bounced. Twice. They added a note. Funds unavailable due to legal hold. That means I can't rely on your payments right now." "I can fix it," Mark said quickly. "This is just a misunderstanding. My wife—" "I don't know what's going on between you and your wife," Foster cut in calmly. "But I do know the law. This is an official notice. You've got a short window to sort it out. After that, it goes further." He pressed a paper onto the door and left without another word. Mark stared at the notice. His chest felt tight. His temples throbbed. Across the street, Mrs. Green stood with her arms folded, watching everything from her front yard. "You should apologize," she said sharply. Mark turned, frustrated. "For what? She left." Mrs. Green's eyes flashed. "You threw her out. I saw you. I saw the woman you brought into that house. He swallowed. Where is she? He asked hoarsely. Where's Elena? Mrs. Green stepped closer to the fence. She left with nothing but her purse and her car. That purse, she added quietly, was holding something you should have respected instead of mocking. He frowned. What does that mean? Mrs. Green held his gaze. You keep calling her broke. You have no idea who she is now. He stared at her, sweating, confused, scared. What did she do? He whispered. Mrs. Green took a slow breath. You'll find out tomorrow. Court has a way of introducing people to the truth. The courtroom doors felt heavier than they looked. Mark pushed them open and stumbled in, like a man walking into his own sentencing. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. The landlord's notice folded in his pocket like a warning. He scanned the room. There she was. Elena sat at the front beside Attorney Ramirez. Her posture was straight, hands folded, hair pulled back neatly. She wore simple clothes, but something about her looked different, solid. She didn't glance around nervously. She didn't search the room for him. She simply sat and waited. Mark's stomach twisted. A court clerk with sharp focus and a calm face called out, Case number 14B, Anderson versus Anderson. He flinched at the sound of his own name. Judge Hall entered, late 50s, composed, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to command a room. All rise. Everyone stood. Mark's knees felt weak. When they sat, Ramirez rose smoothly. Your Honor, we are prepared to present our evidence in support of temporary orders. Judge Hall nodded. Proceed. Ramirez gestured. Your Honor, we will begin with Mr. Dalton. Private investigator Samuel Dalton stepped forward, carrying a thick binder. He spoke clearly, without drama. These are dated photographs, he said, placing the binder on the evidence table. They show Mark Anderson entering hotels with Miss Sabrina Collins on multiple occasions. Times and dates align with nights he reported to his wife as working late or out with friends. Screen images appeared. Mark with Sabrina, handwriting signed on hotel forms, timestamps glowing next to their faces. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Mark shifted in his seat, face burning. Next, Ramirez lifted a stack of printed statements. These, he said, are the last 6 months of joint account activity reviewed by financial investigator Daniel Owens. They show repeated transfers and charges benefiting Ms. Collins, hotel payments, gifts, and cash withdrawals made from a joint marital account without Mrs. Anderson's knowledge or consent. Judge Hall glanced over the papers, brow tightening. Mark tried to speak. Your Honor, that money. Mr. Anderson, the judge said firmly, you will have your chance to respond. Stay seated and quiet until then. His jaw snapped shut. Ramirez continued. Included in the evidence is a recent attempted transfer of $15,000 from the joint account, flagged and held by the bank at the same time our emergency motion was filed. This indicates Mr. Anderson was actively attempting to move funds out of reach after his wife discovered his affair, and he forced her from the marital home. Elena's throat tightened. She didn't look at Mark. She looked only at the judge. Ramirez nodded to the clerk. We also have messages extracted from Mr. Anderson's phone. On the screen, Sabrina. She's useless, Mark. Why is she still there? Sabrina. Move her out. I'm not sharing you forever. Mark. Soon. She has nowhere to go anyway. A quiet gasp passed through the room. Elena's chest rose and fell once, sharply, but her face stayed steady. Ramirez moved to the next witness. HR Director Lewis approached the stand in a tailored suit. Director Lewis, Ramirez said, can you summarize your concerns about Mr. Anderson's work conduct? She folded her hands. We noticed irregular expense reports, unexplained absences, and use of company time and funds for what we later suspected to be personal affairs. After receiving supporting evidence from Mr. Dalton, we initiated a formal investigation. And would you say, Ramirez asked, that this behavior affected not only his employer, but also his family? Yes, Lewis replied. The time and resources he misused belong partly to the household he was supposed to support. Ramirez then presented written statements from Karen and barista Mia, describing what they had seen. Mark with another woman in a parking lot. Mark with someone who looked too close at a cafe. He did not need them in person yet. Their words on paper were enough to paint a pattern. Finally, Ramirez approached the bench with a smaller stack of documents. "Your Honor," he said, "this is the estate confirmation from Pierce and Associates, showing that Mrs. Anderson has inherited $2,000 from her late aunt, Marjorie Pierce. These funds are in her name only and did not come from marital efforts." Judge Hall took the papers, scanned them, then looked at Elena. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "is it correct that you have these funds available to you?" Elena's voice was soft but clear. "Yes, Your Honor." "And did your husband know about this inheritance?" Elena's fingers tightened slightly. "No," she replied. "He called me broke the same day I received the confirmation." The judge's eyes cooled. Ramirez spoke again. "We are requesting temporary exclusive control of the marital home for Mrs. Anderson, protection of her inheritance as separate property, temporary freeze on joint accounts with supervised access, and temporary support from Mr. Anderson once his income is clarified, given his misconduct with marital funds." Mark finally snapped. "This is insane. She left. I didn't force her." Ramirez calmly glanced at the screen, where the message still showed. "Mark, move her out. She has nowhere to go anyway." Judge Hall raised a hand. "Mr. Anderson, sit." He sank back down, chest heaving. The courtroom felt heavy. Finally, Judge Hall spoke. "Mr. Anderson," she began, "this court has reviewed evidence of repeated infidelity, financial misuse, and emotional cruelty, culminating in you ordering your wife out of the home with minimal funds while continuing to support another woman from joint resources." His ears rang. "Mrs. Anderson," the judge continued, "has shown restraint, brought clear evidence, and has a separate inheritance which this court recognizes as her own property." She picked up her pen. "Effective immediately," she said, "the following temporary orders are granted. All joint marital accounts remain under temporary restriction. Withdrawals only as approved by the court or by written agreement. Mrs. Anderson's inheritance from her aunt is confirmed as separate property and cannot be used to satisfy Mr. Anderson's debts. Mrs. Anderson is granted temporary exclusive possession of the marital residence. Mr. Anderson will vacate within 24 hours and may not remove marital property without agreement or further order. Mrs. Anderson may access joint funds under court guidance for basic living expenses until final division is determined." Mark's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Court," Judge Hall finished, "is adjourned for today. A further hearing will address longer-term support and division." The gavel struck. Chairs scraped. People rose. Across the room, Ramirez leaned toward Elena and said quietly, "It's time." She nodded. Mark stared at them, lost. Time for what? The courthouse steps felt taller on the way down. Mark burst through the doors like a man escaping a fire. The sun was too bright. The noise of the street felt too loud. He blinked, searching. He saw her. Elena stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands at her sides, looking out at the street as if she were seeing it for the first time. Attorney Ramirez stood a respectful distance away, speaking softly on his phone, giving her space. "Elena," Mark called, voice cracking. People turned. He stumbled down the steps and nearly tripped on the last one. He caught himself and stopped in front of her, chest heaving. "Elena, please." His voice trembled. "Please don't do this. Don't throw all of this away. We can fix it. I'll change. I'll go to counseling. He dropped to his knees. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Elena, I'm begging you," he said, grabbing at the fabric of her coat. "Don't leave me like this. I'm losing my job, my house, my money, please. I made a mistake. I can't be alone." For a second, it looked like she might step back. She didn't. She simply looked down at him. Not with hatred, not with softness, with clear, final understanding. "You didn't lose me today, Mark," she said quietly. "You lost me the night you called me broke in front of your mistress and threw $50 at me like trash." He winced. "Elena, I was angry," he rushed out. "I was stupid. I didn't mean it. You know I say things I don't." She cut him off. "You meant it," she said. "You believed it. You believed I was nothing without you. You believed I had nowhere to go. You believed I would crawl back even after you stood next to another woman and told me I didn't live in my own home anymore." His shoulders shook. "Elena, I swear, if you give me one more chance..." She studied his face for a moment, as if searching for the man she had married, the one who once held her hand and promised, "It's us forever." She couldn't find him. "You threw $50 at me," she said softly, but her voice carried. "The same day I confirmed I had inherited 2 million. His eyes widened. "What?" he whispered. She reached into her purse and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. He recognized the logo from the court papers. Pierce and Associates. "You kept telling me I was broke," she continued. "You didn't ask about the envelope. You didn't care where I'd been that morning. You didn't listen when I tried to talk. You were so busy proving I was nothing that you never noticed I was already standing on something stronger than you." She slipped the envelope back into her purse. "You called me broke," she said. "I was quiet enough to let you believe it. That was my mistake. I will not make it again." He shook his head, voice rising in panic. "Elena, please, I didn't know. You have that kind of money? We could fix everything. We could pay the debts, straighten out the accounts, fight the company. If you just help me." Her eyes hardened, but there was sadness in them too. "You want my inheritance?" she said. "Not my heart. You didn't want me when you thought I had nothing. You wanted Sabrina. You wanted freedom from me. You got it." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the ground. Across the street, Mrs. Green stood watching from the sidewalk. Arms crossed. She wasn't smiling. She simply nodded once, as if to herself. A few steps away, barista Mia stepped out of a nearby cafe on her break. She spotted Elena, lifted a small, proud hand in greeting. Elena answered with a faint smile. Her phone buzzed. Karen's name lit up. "Karen. Saw the updates online. I'm proud of you. You did what he thought you never would." Elena took a steady breath. Mark's hand slipped from her coat and dropped to his sides. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She believed he was sorry for losing comfort, control, image. She did not believe he was sorry for who he had chosen to be. "Elena," he tried again, voice small now. "Don't leave me alone." She glanced past him, up at the courthouse doors, then back at the street stretching out ahead. "You were never alone," she said quietly. "You just never looked beside you, not at me, not at what you had, and now you don't." A car pulled up to the curb. Ramirez ended his call and walked over, opening the back door for her. She turned slightly, giving Mark one last look. "Remember this," she said. "You threw $50 at a woman who had 2 million and a choice, and I chose not to spend a single cent saving a man who never valued me." His face crumpled. She stepped into the car and sat down. Ramirez closed the door gently. The engine started. As the car pulled away, Mark remained on the steps, staring after it, tears blurring his vision. The woman he had mocked as broke was leaving with quiet power and legal protection, and he was left with the echo of his own decisions. Inside the car, Elena looked out the window. The courthouse grew smaller in the glass. Her hand rested on her purse over the envelope and the future it represented. She whispered almost to herself, "Aunt Marjorie, I'm using it to stand." In her reflection, she saw not a victim, but a woman at the beginning of a new story. She didn't know yet exactly what she would build. A new home, a business, a fresh life. But she knew one thing. She would never again stay where she was treated as less than what she was. Some doors close so the right ones can finally open. The car drove forward. The old life stayed behind. And Elena Anderson, once called broke, moved into the next scene of her life. No longer quiet for someone else, but strong for herself. Husband came begging, his ex-wife 5 years later, after his 15-year marriage betrayal unaware. The woman who walked away quietly is now a billionaire CEO. He betrayed her after 15 long years of marriage, and when she walked away, he laughed, certain she would never survive without him. Daniel believed he'd buried Elena for good the night he paraded his mistress into their home, tore up their memories, and told her, "You're finished without me. You'll come crawling back." But she didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply looked at him one last time, whispered, "Thank you for teaching me what peace costs," and walked away quietly. No one saw her again. Not at the parties she once hosted, not in the city where her name had once been his pride. While Daniel built his empire on arrogance, the woman he discarded was building something far greater in silence. 5 years later, the empire she built would tower over his. The world would know her as Elena Carter, the billionaire CEO of Aurora Holdings. And the man who mocked her? He would be the one standing at her door, broke, desperate, and begging the woman who once begged him to stay. He never knew the silence he mistook for surrender was the sound of a woman rebuilding her throne. He never knew that the one who walked away quietly would be the name whispered in boardrooms and printed on billion-dollar contracts. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the testament that dignity speaks louder than revenge, and that sometimes the quietest woman becomes the most powerful storm. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting her victory fade back into silence. Click that button, and in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, so Elena knows the world is listening to the woman who walked away quietly and came back unstoppable. The steak had turned cold. The candles had melted down to stubs. Only the ticking of the gold clock filled the silence of the glass penthouse. Elena Carter stood by the table, her hands trembling slightly as she straightened the cutlery for the third time. 15 years of marriage, and she still couldn't let go of the small habits. Perfect table settings, soft music, the scent of rosemary that Daniel once said reminded him of home. But tonight, home felt like a stage she was forced to perform on alone. The elevator chimed. Her heart leapt, then sank when she heard the sharp laughter that followed. Daniel's voice came first, smooth and careless, followed by another laugh, a woman's. He stepped in, his tie loosened, his cologne heavy, his arm draped around a tall brunette in a red dress. Clara. Elena knew the name before she even heard it. The woman worked at his company. She had met her once at a corporate dinner. Still awake? Daniel said lightly, as if he hadn't disappeared for 3 nights in a row. He didn't even look at the table she'd prepared. You didn't have to wait. Elena's throat tightened. It's our anniversary, she whispered. Clara's lips curled. Oh, 15 years, right? That's impressive. She said it like a joke, like the years meant nothing. Elena tried to breathe evenly. I thought we could have dinner. Just us. Daniel glanced at the table, then shrugged. We already ate. His voice carried no guilt. You should have called instead of assuming. Her fingers dug into the edge of the chair. Every word scraped against her chest. You promised you'd come home early. He laughed softly. You take promises too seriously, Elena. That's why you're always disappointed. The woman who had once built his world now felt smaller than the shadow he cast. Elena's eyes glistened, but no tears fell. Something inside her, the part that once waited, forgave, and hoped, finally broke in silence. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. So many. Lights, she thought, and yet I'm standing in the dark. Behind her, Daniel's phone buzzed. Clara picked it up, smiling. We should go, babe. Early meeting tomorrow. Daniel nodded, already halfway to the door. Don't wait up. The elevator doors slid shut with a hiss. Elena stood still, the silence louder than their cruelty. Then she blew out the last candle, one by one, until the room fell into darkness. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, and as she turned away, her eyes caught the faint glow from Daniel's forgotten laptop on the counter, its screen flickering with unread emails. She didn't know it yet, but the next click she made would change everything. The sound shattered the quiet, an urgent ding that echoed through the empty penthouse like a warning bell. Elena froze. It was Daniel's laptop, still open on the kitchen counter, the screen glowing in the dark like a secret begging to be seen. Her heart pounded in her ears. For a long moment, she didn't move. She knew she shouldn't look. She wanted to keep believing that what she saw tonight was only confusion, not confirmation. But then the email alert flashed again. From Clara L. Subject: the deal closes once she signs. Her trembling hand brushed the trackpad. The message opened. She doesn't suspect anything. Once Elena signs the property transfer, you'll finally be free. I booked the hotel for the weekend. Love you. Elena's breath caught. Her hand clamped over her mouth. Her knees went weak, and she sank onto the nearest chair. The words blurred through tears, but the meaning burned clear. Daniel hadn't just betrayed her heart. He was moving to take everything she owned. The apartment swam before her eyes, the paintings she'd chosen, the furniture she'd paid for, the empire she'd quietly helped him build. All of it now turning into weapons against her. Her pulse slowed, and the intensity of the shock bled into a cold, heavy stillness. She stared at the glowing screen, her reflection faint in the glass, pale, shaking, unrecognizable. She whispered to herself, "You weren't just cheating, Daniel. You were planning my erasure." She scrolled. Another email loaded, dated last week. "She's too soft to fight back. Once she's gone, I'll be the sole name on every document." Something shifted inside her, then not an explosion, but a quiet cracking, like glass giving way under pressure. The years of waiting, forgiving, and hoping fused into one wordless realization. She stood up, wiped her tears, closed the laptop slowly, deliberately. The same fingers that once buttoned his shirts now pressed down on the lid until the screen went black. She walked toward the mirror near the hallway. Her reflection stared back, eyes red, face tired, but behind the pain, something sharp had awakened. In the silence, she whispered, "You'll never see me break again." Outside, thunder rolled over the city, echoing through the problem windows. Elena picked up the laptop and set it on the table, her mind already spinning. Somewhere inside that machine, she knew, lay more than betrayal proof, maybe, and the beginning of her escape. As lightning flashed, it illuminated a small envelope Daniel had left beside his briefcase, her name printed neatly across it. Tomorrow, when she opens that envelope, it won't just end their marriage. It will start her war. The door burst open. Elena jumped, the half-closed laptop trembling under her hand. Daniel staggered in, rain dripping from his suit jacket, his face flushed from whiskey. His tie hung loose, his phone still in his palm. A woman's voice spilled from the speaker, Clara's voice, laughing. "Turn that off," Elena said, her voice low but steady. He didn't. He smirked. "Why? Embarrassed to hear the truth?" He tossed the phone onto the couch and looked around, noticing the dinner table still set. "You still trying to play wife?" Her chest burned. 15 years, Daniel. 15 years of loyalty, and you walk in here with her voice on your phone? He shrugged, unbothered. "Don't start the drama, Elena. You knew this marriage was over long before I said it. You just didn't want to face it." "I didn't know you were planning to steal everything I built," she snapped. "I saw your emails." That hit him. His smirk twitched, but he recovered fast. "You went through my computer? That's low, even for you." "Low?" She took a shaky step forward. "You were arranging to have me sign my name away. You were laughing about it with her." He stepped closer, the arrogance thick in his smile. "You think you built anything? Everything you touched came from me. I gave you this life." The words slammed into her like a slap, but beneath the pain, something began to cool. The fear melted. Her tears stopped. "You're wrong," she said softly. "You gave me comfort, but I built your peace." He laughed. "Peace? You've been a burden for years, Elena. The only reason I didn't leave sooner was because pity's hard to shake off." The glass in her hand cracked under pressure. It cut her palm, but she didn't flinch. "Pity?" she whispered. "You mistake patience for weakness." "Whatever makes you sleep better," he said, grabbing a folder from his bag. "Sign these papers. You'll get enough to live quietly if you behave." Her eyes fell to the folder. Divorce papers, property transfers, everything she'd already seen in those emails. She looked up at him, truly looked, and realized she no longer feared him. Not his voice, not his power, not his cruelty. She took the pen, signed one page, then dropped it on the table with a small, deliberate smile. "You'll regret underestimating silence," she said quietly. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" She turned her back, pressing a napkin to her bleeding hand. "You'll find out soon enough." Behind her, Daniel's phone buzzed again, another message from Clara. This one read, "Did she sign everything yet? Remember, once she's gone, we move fast." Elena glanced at the glowing phone screen, and a single thought cut through her fear. They think I'm gone already. Let's see how right they are. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, please take a second to do it now. Every click, every share, every comment helps us keep telling stories that give strength to women and children who've been broken, forgotten, or silenced. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting a channel, you're standing beside survivors, saying their stories matter. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story that could change a life. And in the comments, tell us, where are you watching from and what part of this story spoke to your heart? The rain pounded harder that night. Thunder cracked like broken promises as Elena shoved her suitcase shut. Every zip, every fold, every step felt heavier than the last. The penthouse that once glowed with warmth now looked like a stranger's house. Cold marble floors, empty wine glasses, and the faint smell of perfume that wasn't hers. Her bleeding hand throbbed as she pressed it against her coat. The cut from the glass stung, but it was nothing compared to the wound inside her chest. She looked around one last time. The photo on the mantel, her and Daniel smiling on their wedding day, was cracked from the fall earlier. She bent, picked it up, and stared at it for a long, still moment. Then, without a word, she turned the frame face down. Lightning flashed through the windows as she took her small suitcase and headed for the elevator. Each step echoed like a countdown, 15 years of love, 15 years of loyalty, now ending in quiet footsteps on polished floors. The elevator doors opened with a metallic sigh. She stepped inside, her reflection mirrored across the golden walls. For the first time, she didn't see a broken woman. She saw someone who had survived a fire and was walking out alive. Her phone vibrated. A message from Daniel. "Don't be dramatic, Elena. You'll thank me one day." She stared at it, her lips trembling but not with sadness this time. "You'll wish I was dramatic," she whispered, pressing delete. The elevator descended. Each floor she passed felt like shedding another layer of pain. When the doors opened to the lobby, the doorman, Mr. Hensley, stood frozen. He was an older man, gray hair, kind eyes, the only person in the building who ever asked if she was okay. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, his face worried. "You're leaving? In this weather?" Elena nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, Mr. Hensley, it's just time." He hesitated. "Do you need a cab?" She shook her head. "No, I need peace." He nodded slowly, his gaze following her as she stepped out into the storm. The wind whipped her hair, the rain, soaking through her coat, but she didn't stop. Each drop washed something off her, the humiliation, the fear, the old version of herself. As she reached the curb, a black sedan pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down slowly, revealing a familiar voice. "Elena Carter?" a calm male voice asked. "Mr. Whitmore sent me. He said you'd be needing his help." Her breath caught. She didn't know it yet, but that single name, Whitmore, would become the key to the empire she'd one day command. The flickering motel sign buzzed in the rain. Half the word hope burned out so only OP glowed weakly against the night. Water dripped from Elena's coat as she pushed open the creaky door to room 12. The stale air smelled of bleach and lost dreams. She dropped her small suitcase by the bed, the springs sagging like her spirit. The rain outside beat against the window in angry rhythm, each drop echoing her heartbeat. Her hands still hurt from the glass cut, wrapped now in a strip of old tissue. She stood in the center of the room for a long moment, listening to the hum of the heater, the distant thunder, the silence inside her. Everything she once owned, her home, her comfort, her trust, was gone. Her reflection in the cracked mirror was pale and hollow. The woman staring back at her looked like a ghost, not the wife who had once laughed at candlelit dinners. But beneath the exhaustion, something new was beginning, something fierce. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her knees close, and her mind drifted to the past. Flashback. 15 years earlier, she and Daniel had sat in a cheap diner, hands clasped across the table. He'd promised, "Whatever happens, we face it together. I'll build, you'll dream." She'd smiled, believing him with all her heart. Back then, the future seemed full of color. The memory burned now like acid. "He took everything," she whispered, voice breaking. "But he couldn't take my will." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not anymore. She stood and opened the small nightstand drawer. Inside lay a faded notepad and a broken pen. She stared at it, then sat down and began to write slowly, deliberately, across the first clean page. "Start again." The words looked small, but they pulsed with power. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the rain-streaked window. The water on the glass shimmered like tears, but these weren't hers anymore. She had cried her last. She turned off the room's single light and lay back on the bed, whispering into the darkness. You destroyed the life I had, Daniel. But I'm going to build one you'll never reach. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. Unknown number. One message. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Whitmore will see you tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. Her eyes widened. The name again. Whitmore. Elena didn't know that meeting him would not only rewrite her fate, it would become the first brick in the empire her ex-husband would one day kneel before. The next morning, the world turned cruel. Elena woke to her phone, buzzing nonstop. Dozens of notifications blinked across the cracked screen like sparks from a fire she couldn't put out. She hesitated, thumb hovering above the screen, then opened one. Headline: CEO Daniel Carter files for divorce, sources say wife couldn't keep up with his success. Her breath hitched. Another post followed, then another. Each headline sharper than the last, each one slicing deeper. She lost her mind after he made it big. He deserved better, she was holding him back. Elena Carter vanished last night. Watch her disappear. That last comment froze her. Watch her disappear. The words crawled under her skin, echoing like a dare. She sat on the edge of the motel bed, scrolling until her vision blurred. Photos of her old charity galas, board events, red carpets now filled gossip pages with captions twisting her silence into scandal. The same faces that once smiled beside her now reposted lies with laughing emojis. Her chest tightened, the ache almost physical. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, but after a while something shifted. She stopped crying. She stared at her phone screen one last time, then opened her social media account. The world expected her to post a defense, a denial, a desperate plea for dignity. Instead, she tapped delete account. The confirmation message appeared. Are you sure you want to erase your profile? She pressed yes. The screen went black. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was cleansing. The laughter outside her digital walls couldn't reach her anymore. For the first time in years, the noise was gone. She took a deep breath. In that small motel room, she began to understand something powerful. They could mock her name, twist her story, erase her online, but they couldn't define who she was becoming. She whispered to herself, steady and calm, let them laugh. I'll give them something to talk about later. Her reflection in the Rain Street window looked different now. Still bruised, still tired, but sharper. Her loneliness had become something stronger. Focus. She turned off her phone completely, tucked it into her bag, and picked up her notepad from the nightstand. On the first line beneath Start Again, she wrote, Rule 1. Build in silence. Let success do the speaking. A faint smile tugged at her lips. The world might have buried her, but they had just cleared the ground for her rise. Her eyes lifted toward the clock. 7:43 a.m. 15 minutes until her meeting. Outside, a sleek black car pulled up under the motel's flickering sign. A man in a suit stepped out, checked his watch, and looked up toward her window. Mr. Whitmore's driver had arrived. The years did not pass quietly, they worked quietly. 5 years later, the world had long forgotten the woman they once mocked. The headlines that smeared her name had been buried under new scandals. But while the noise faded, Elena Carter was building her foundation in silence. The scene opened with her bent over a small wooden desk in a rented room above a bookstore. The light bulb flickered weakly overhead, her eyes strained from studying balance sheets and night school textbooks. Her hands, once soft from luxury, now bore faint calluses, the marks of someone who'd learned to survive without help. Stacks of papers surrounded her business plans, sketches, ideas written in pen and crossed out, rewritten again and again. In one corner of the room stood a vision board cut from old magazines, words like rebuild, integrity, and future. Every night after her remote accounting shifts ended, she stayed awake, drawing up models for a new kind of company, one built on fairness and truth, the very values Daniel had thrown away. Her old life had been taken. Her new one was being designed, quietly. She'd stopped wearing jewelry, stopped caring for gossip, and started focusing on progress. Every failure became a lesson, every sleepless night an investment. Then one morning, As she was packing her notes into an envelope to send for a small grant, a soft knock sounded on the door. "Come in," she said, her voice calm, cautious. An elderly woman stepped inside, elegant in a simple gray suit. Her white hair was pinned neatly, her eyes sharp and kind. "I'm Mrs. Carter," she introduced, setting a folder on the table. "A retired investor. I've been following your work through the community program. Your projections are sound. You're building something honest." Elena froze. "Mrs. Carter, you mean?" The woman smiled. "No relation, my dear, but maybe fate thought you could use another Carter in your story." She opened her folder, revealing a check. $20,000. Seed money, let's see what you can make of it." Elena stared, speechless. "What name should I give it?" "The," woman asked softly. Elena looked toward the window. Morning light was breaking over the city skyline, painting gold across the rooftops. "Aurora," she said finally. "Because dawn always comes quietly." Mrs. Carter's eyes gleamed with pride. "Then let it rise, Elena. Quietly, but brightly." The older woman left, and Elena stood by the window, holding the check close to her chest. The first real light she'd felt in years reflected off the paper. As the camera pulled back, the sign on her desk came into view. AU or Aurora Holdings. Founded 2018, and beneath it, a single whisper escaped her lips. "Let's see who laughs when the dawn breaks." The scene opened with chaos, phones ringing, printers whirring, and Elena Carter balancing 3 files in her arms as rain pounded against the co-working office windows. "Contract number 6, someone shouted from across the shared space. A paper slipped from her stack, scattering across the wet floor. For a split second, panic flickered. Then Elena laughed softly, the sound calm, grounded, almost amused. She was no longer the fragile woman who once shook in silence. She was rebuilding one small contract, one late night, one risk at a time. Her first office wasn't grand. It was a corner desk in a co-working space with a flickering lamp and an old coffee mug that read, "Make it happen." But to her, it was a kingdom. Every day brought challenges, rejected proposals, missed calls, late payments. But every failure came with a lesson, and with every lesson, she grew stronger. Flashback. She remembered the early days, the investor who called her too emotional for leadership, the bank that declined her small business loan, the nights she went without dinner to pay for another business license. Each disappointment had forged her resolve, polishing her composure until even silence felt powerful. Now, Aurora Holdings was gaining attention. Small tech startups trusted her. Local vendors praised her fairness. She didn't fight for attention. Her integrity drew it naturally. Across from her, Mrs. Carter, her mentor and silent investor, sat by the window with a steaming cup of tea. Her silver hair shimmered in the afternoon light, her eyes studying Elena like a proud teacher. "People think silence means defeat," Elena said, sorting through invoices. Mrs. Carter smiled knowingly. "It only means you're choosing where to roar." The words landed deep. Elena looked up, her gaze calm but resolute. "Then I'll roar where it matters most." On her desk sat a small flock of paper cranes, each one folded from an old contract page. It had become her ritual. Every client gained, every promise honored, turned into a crane. She called them her quiet victories. Mrs. Carter traced one gently. "These little things, they'll remind you how far you've come. They'll remind me who I became," Elena corrected softly. Outside, the storm eased, sunlight cutting through the gray clouds. It spilled across the desk, glinting off the cranes like wings ready to take flight. A knock interrupted the calm. A young assistant entered, nervous but excited. "Miss Carter, there's someone requesting a meeting. Says he's from Carter Enterprises." Elena froze. That name, that company. Her pulse slowed. "What's his name?" The assistant hesitated. "He said you'd know him. Daniel Carter." Elena's fingers brushed the nearest paper crane and crushed it slowly in her palm. "Tell him. I'll see him." The boardroom lights glared like spotlights on a stage. Dozens of eyes turned toward the tall woman at the head of the table, confident posture, calm expression, black suit sharp as glass. But no one in that room knew who she truly was. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator said, voice trembling slightly, Please welcome the CEO of Aurora Holdings, Miss E.C. Turner. Cameras flashed, hands clapped. The woman smiled faintly. Elena Carter Turner, the name she'd chosen after years of silence, nodded once, then began. "We are not just rebuilding companies," she said, her voice steady, deliberate. "We are rebuilding trust." Her words carried the weight of every humiliation she had endured, but none of the bitterness. She had learned long ago that true revenge didn't come from anger, it came from excellence. The investors leaned forward as she continued, explaining Aurora's expansion. Technology firms, clean energy projects, ethical finance ventures. Her tone was measured, professional, impossible to challenge. When she finished, an older man in a gray suit spoke. "I've been in this industry 30 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of dreamers. But you?" He smiled, impressed. "You run Aurora?" Elena's eyes met his. She gave a small, knowing smile. "I am Aurora." The room went silent, then applause filled the air. As the meeting broke, reporters gathered by the door. No one noticed that her nameplate only read E.C. Turner. No one connected her to the broken woman Daniel Carter had divorced 5 years earlier. The world had erased Elena Carter, and she had used that erasure as her disguise. After the room cleared, Mrs. Carter entered quietly. Her mentor's cane clicked softly against the marble floor. "You did well," she said. "The world sees a mystery now. That's more powerful than fame." Elena smiled gently. "They only see the initials, not the scars behind them." "Initials can be armor," Mrs. Carter replied. "Anonymity is your weapon." Elena walked to the tall window, looking out at the skyline that had once seemed unreachable. "He always said I'd disappear," she murmured. "Maybe he was right. I disappeared and came back untouchable." Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes glinting. "And one day, he'll realize the woman he betrayed is the one holding his future." Thunder rolled softly in the distance, like a reminder of storms long past. Elena's phone buzzed on the table. A message from her secretary flashed across the screen. "Carter Enterprises has requested a meeting with Aurora Holdings next week. They're desperate for a merger." Elena's reflection in the glass hardened. "Let them come," she whispered. "They'll meet E.C. Turner, not the woman they left behind." The boardroom lights glared like spotlights on a stage. Dozens of eyes turned toward the tall woman at the head of the table, confident posture, calm expression, black suit, sharp as glass. But no one in that room knew who she truly was. "Ladies and gentlemen," the moderator said, voice trembling slightly, "please welcome the CEO of Aurora Holdings, Miss E.C. Turner." Cameras flashed. Hands clapped. The woman smiled faintly. Elena Carter Turner, the name she'd chosen after years of silence, nodded once, then began. "We are not just rebuilding companies," she said, her voice steady, deliberate. "We are rebuilding trust." Her words carried the weight of every humiliation she had endured, but none of the bitterness. She had learned long ago that true revenge didn't come from anger, it came from excellence. The investors leaned forward as she continued, explaining Aurora's expansion. Technology firms, clean energy projects, ethical finance ventures. Her tone was measured, professional, impossible to challenge. When she finished, an older man in a gray suit spoke. "I've been in this industry 30 years, he said. "I've seen a lot of dreamers. But you," he smiled, impressed. "You run Aurora?" Elena's eyes met his. She gave a small, knowing smile. "I am Aurora." The room went silent. Then applause filled the air. As the meeting broke, reporters gathered by the door. No one noticed that her nameplate only read E.C. Turner. No one connected her to the broken woman Daniel Carter had divorced 5 years earlier. The world had erased Elena Carter, and she had used that erasure as her disguise. After the room cleared, Mrs. Carter entered quietly. Her mentor's cane clicked softly against the marble floor. "You did well," she said. "The world sees a mystery now. That's more powerful than fame." Elena smiled gently. "They only see the initials, not the scars behind them." "Initials can be armor," Mrs. Carter replied. "Anonymity is your weapon." Elena walked to the tall window, looking out at the skyline that had once seemed unreachable. "He always said I'd disappear," she murmured. "Maybe he was right. I disappeared and came back untouchable." Mrs. Carter nodded, her eyes glinting. "And one day, He'll realize the woman he betrayed is the one holding his future. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, like a reminder of storms long past. Elena's phone buzzed on the table. A message from her secretary flashed across the screen. Carter Enterprises has requested a meeting with Aurora Holdings next week. They're desperate for a merger. Elena's reflection in the glass hardened. Let them come, she whispered. They'll meet EC. Turner, not the woman they left behind. The sound of shouting erupted through the glass walls of Thornton Logistics boardroom. Papers flew. A coffee cup shattered against the marble floor. Daniel Carter slammed his fist on the table. You're all cowards, he roared, veins bulging at his temple. We just need one more quarter, one investor willing to take the risk. Across from him, Clara shifted uncomfortably in her sleek black dress. Her tone was sharp but measured the voice of a woman who'd learned to survive beside arrogance. Daniel, investors aren't leaving because of bad luck. They're leaving because they don't trust you anymore. He spun toward her, eyes blazing. I gave them everything. My time, my vision, my name. She cut him off. Your name doesn't open doors anymore. It closes them. The room fell into uneasy silence. Daniel's breath came heavy, anger fading into something colder fear. He turned toward the glass wall, staring at his reflection. For a moment, he didn't recognize the man looking back. The confident CEO had been replaced by someone older, harder, worn down. A crack ran across the mirrored surface, faint but visible. The reflection split, jagged and distorted. His pride had shattered long before the glass did. Clara crossed her arms. The board is talking about a buyout. They want someone stable to take over. Someone who can fix what's left. Daniel clenched his jaw. Stable? You mean replace me? They're already considering it, she said softly. Thornton is drowning, Daniel. Maybe it's time to ask for help, he scoffed. From who? She hesitated, pulling a printed proposal from her folder. There's a company rumored to have deep capital reserves, Aurora Holdings. They've been buying distressed firms quietly for years. They could save us, Daniel frowned. Aurora? The name rang faintly familiar, but he couldn't place it. Clara continued. Their CEO, EC. Turner is known for reviving companies others abandon. Calm, strategic, almost invisible, but effective. Daniel paced to the window, the skyline blurring behind streaks of rain. He hated the thought of asking anyone for help, but desperation had already begun to outweigh pride. Fine, he muttered. Set the meeting. If they can fix this mess, I'll make the deal. Clara gave a small nod, though her eyes flickered with unease. I'll arrange it. Daniel turned away from her, gripping the cracked glass. His own fractured reflection stared back. Whoever this Turner is, he muttered, they'll finally understand what it means to deal with Daniel Carter. Clara looked down at the proposal, her lips tightening as she read the initials. Again, E.C. Turner. If only Daniel knew the storm he was about to walk into. The meeting began with the intensity of desperation. Daniel Carter stood before the gleaming glass wall of Aurora Holdings' top-floor boardroom, sweat faintly gathering at his collar despite the air conditioning. His voice carried confidence, but his eyes betrayed strain. We believe in loyalty, he declared, gesturing to the screen filled with charts. And partnership. Two values that built Thornton Logistics from the ground up. With Aurora's support, we can rebuild stronger together. Around the polished mahogany table, Aurora's executives exchanged polite glances, their faces unreadable. The tension in the room was thick. One of the executives, a young woman with a tablet, leaned slightly forward. Mr. Carter, we appreciate your passion, but Aurora doesn't just invest in numbers, we invest in integrity. Daniel gave a practiced smile. Then you'll find no shortage of that. Here. As he spoke, the conference room doors slid open with a soft mechanical hiss. Everyone turned instinctively. The CEO had arrived. She walked in with quiet grace, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. The air changed the moment she entered, like calm before a thunderstorm. Daniel's voice faltered. He turned slowly, ready to introduce himself to this elusive E.C. Turner he'd heard so much about. But his words died on his tongue, because standing before him was a face he thought he'd buried 5 years ago. Elena? He whispered, his voice barely audible. Her expression didn't change. Her gaze was steady, cool, professional. She stopped at the head of the table, setting down her folder, and nodded at the team. "Continue," she said softly, then turned her eyes to Daniel. "You were saying something about loyalty and partnership?" He swallowed hard, trying to recover. I didn't realize." "No," she interrupted, her tone calm but cutting. "You didn't realize much back then either." A faint murmur rippled among the executives. None dared to speak. The silence hung heavy. Elena finally took her seat, folding her hands neatly on the table. "Please," she said, her voice now cool as glass, "continue your presentation. Aurora is very interested in understanding how you define loyalty these days." Daniel's jaw tightened. His fingers twitched against the laser pointer. For the first time in years, he had no words. Across the room, Elena's mentor, Mrs. Carter, stood quietly in the corner, observing like a guardian of truth. Her eyes flicked toward Elena with subtle pride. The woman who once walked away in silence was now sitting in command. Daniel stared at the logo behind her Aura Holdings and realized with a chill that the empire he'd come begging to was born from the ashes of the woman he'd destroyed. Elena's lips curved into the faintest, coldest smile. "Don't worry, Daniel," she said softly. "This time, I'll let the whole world hear your pitch." The conference room pulsed with energy. Assistants moved like clockwork, hands full of checklists, folders, and glowing tablets. The air was thick with anticipation and something sharper: precision. At the center of it all sat Elena Carter Turner, calm, composed, unstoppable. "Run me through the guest list again," she said, her tone measured but firm. Her assistant, Mia, scrolled quickly through her tablet. Confirmed attendees include heads of state, major investors, press executives, and, she hesitated, Daniel Carter. He RSVP'd this morning. The pen in Elena's hand paused midair. For half a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Then she set the pen down gently and smiled. "Good," she said. "Then let's make sure the lighting is merciless." A few team members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if she was joking. She wasn't. "The stage?" she continued. "Set," said another coordinator. "The backdrop reads Empires Built on Integrity." Elena nodded slowly. "Perfect." Her gaze shifted toward the panoramic window, where the city shimmered beneath the setting sun. "Let's remind everyone that empires without it always fall." Her voice carried no bitterness, only clarity. Mia adjusted her headset, still curious. "Ma'am, if I may, why allow him to attend? After everything?" Elena looked up. The light caught her eyes, reflecting strength forged through years of silence. "Because true justice doesn't chase. It waits where the guilty walk in willingly." The room fell quiet again. Her calm had gravity, the kind that made everyone instinctively follow. Across the table, Mrs. Carter, her mentor, observed quietly with folded hands. "You've learned well," she murmured. "Power with grace, justice with restraint." Elena offered a faint smile. "I learned from the best." Her assistant spoke again. "Everything is ready for the broadcast. Global syndication confirmed. The theme of the night, integrity and leadership, will open with your keynote. Then that's where truth begins," Elena said, standing. She moved toward the tall windows, the skyline reflecting across her black silk suit like armor. "We'll give the world a lesson on what it means to build honestly." The entire team stood still, almost in reverence. For 5 years, the world had written Elena off as a forgotten ex-wife. Tomorrow night, the same world would watch her redefine power. As she reached for her folder, the screen on her phone lit up a private message from an unknown number. "See you at the gala, Elena. Don't forget who taught you how to play the game. D.C." Her smile faded, replaced by cool determination. She slipped the phone into her bag and whispered, "Oh, I haven't forgotten, Daniel. I just learned to win." The ballroom thundered with applause as golden lights swept across marble and glass. Cameras flashed. Strings played a soaring melody. Beneath a sky of paper cranes, hundreds of them, folded from Aurora contracts, the stage glimmered like a crown. Daniel Carter stood near the back, frozen in place. His tuxedo was perfect, but his eyes darted anxiously across the crowd. He hadn't seen her yet. The master of ceremonies raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate empires built on integrity, Please welcome our visionary CEO, Miss E.C. Turner. The spotlights flared blinding, merciless. From the far end of the hall, Elena stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its breath. She wore the same blue dress from that humiliating night years ago, but now it was recut, regal, perfectly tailored. No stains, no shame, only quiet power. The crowd rose in applause that sounded like waves breaking against stone. Daniel's lips parted, his voice trembled. Elena? She didn't look at him. Instead, she climbed the stairs to the stage, each step deliberate, steady. The paper cranes above caught the light, shimmering like memories reclaimed. At the podium, she waited for the applause to fade. When silence finally fell, she smiled calm, assured, untouchable. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying through the speakers, I learned that silence isn't defeat, it's preparation. Every setback, every betrayal, every insult, they became lessons in strength. The crowd leaned forward, transfixed. Daniel felt sweat forming at the back of his neck. Integrity, she continued, isn't just a word we print on banners. It's a choice we make when no one is watching. Aurora Holdings was built on that choice and on the belief that light must always expose the truth. As she spoke, the lights dimmed slightly, narrowing the spotlight until it fell directly on Daniel. Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters turned their cameras. Elena's gaze finally met his. Her eyes were calm, almost kind. I once knew a man who believed power meant control, she said softly. He forgot that the greatest empires collapse when they're built on deceit. Daniel's throat went dry. The walls seemed to close in. The audience whispered. The press lenses flashed faster. Elena stepped back from the podium. So, tonight, she said, we honor the builders and expose the destroyers. The orchestra swelled. Behind her, a massive screen flickered to life, displaying the title of her next address, The True Story Behind Thornton's Fall. Daniel's heart stopped. As the lights burned brighter, Elena's eyes glinted with calm fire. Sometimes, she murmured into the mic, justice only needs a stage. The ballroom erupted into chaos the moment the screen behind Elena changed. Charts, documents, and archived footage rolled in sequence. Thornton Logistics, falsified reports, embezzlement leaks, fraudulent supplier chains. Gasps spread like wildfire. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. Daniel staggered back, pale and cornered, his confident smile gone. Every word she'd said now had proof glowing 10 feet tall behind her. Miss Turner, a reporter called sharply, are these claims suggesting Thornton Logistics engaged in unethical practices under Daniel Carter's leadership? Elena faced the crowd with calm control. The evidence speaks for itself, she said simply. Another reporter shouted, and what inspired Aurora's focus on integrity? A hush fell again. Elena's gaze softened for a second. A flicker of memory passed over her face. The motel rain, the flickering OP sign of broken hope. Then she lifted her chin. Resilience, she said quietly. Some foundations start as cracks, but when light passes through those cracks, it builds something unbreakable. The room froze. It wasn't revenge in her tone, it was truth. The audience leaned in, transfixed. An older journalist near the front stood. Miss Turner, are you implying that your personal history with Mr. Carter influenced Aurora's ethics policy? Elena's lips curved slightly. I'm implying that betrayal teaches clarity faster than success ever can. A sharp murmur spread. Phones buzzed. Investors whispered in corners. Screens across the room flickered with live social media feeds. Aurora Gala number, integrity over power, number Thornton collapse. At the back of the hall, Clara Daniels, current operations manager, checked her phone. The company's stock had started to plummet mid-event. Live. Investors were pulling out, one by one. Daniel's voice cracked through the rising hum. Elena, this is slander, he shouted, stepping forward. You, Mr. Carter, interrupted the MC quickly, but it was too late. Cameras turned to him like judgment. Elena didn't move. No, she said softly, it's truth, and the world can decide which one of us has lived by it. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then applause. Slow, deliberate, growing. until the entire ballroom stood. Daniel stood alone in the spotlight, the same one that once crowned him successful, now exposing him completely. Elena turned from the mic, her composure unbroken. She wasn't smiling, but peace glowed in her eyes. Vindication without venom. Beside the stage, Mrs. Carter whispered to her, "You've done it, dear." Elena's voice was quiet, almost wistful. "Not yet." As she looked toward the exit, her gaze hardened slightly. "The world's only seen the truth," she murmured. "Now it's time they hear the proof." The terrace doors burst open. Cool night air swept through, chasing away the leftover heat of cameras and whispers. The city stretched below silver towers and glowing veins of traffic. Daniel stumbled out first, his tie loose, face streaked with panic and sweat. "Elena," he called, his voice breaking. "Elena, please just listen." She stood at the railing, calm as the skyline, her blue gown catching the wind like silk armor. Her reflection shimmered in the wet pavement, the same kind of rain that had once soaked her as she left him 5 years ago. But this time, she was dry, untouchable. Daniel approached slowly, hands trembling. "Please," he whispered, falling to his knees. "I lost everything. The investors, the company, even Clara left. He swallowed hard. "I have nothing left." Elena turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "No, Daniel," she said softly. "You still have what you always had, your excuses." He blinked, tears spilling freely now. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I was blind, stupid, drunk on my own pride. Just give me one chance to make it right." For a heartbeat, the air between them was still. Only the hum of the city below broke the silence. Elena stepped closer, her heels clicking against the stone. "Do you remember the night I begged you to believe in me?" she asked quietly. "When I told you that partnership meant standing together, not tearing down?" Daniel nodded weakly, unable to meet her gaze. "I begged for respect," she continued. "Not money, not position, just respect. And you laughed." Her voice didn't rise, it cut like ice through air. He covered his face, sobbing. "I know. I was a fool." Elena's tone softened, almost mournful. "You didn't lose me tonight, Daniel. You lost me the day I realized I didn't need your approval to exist." Lightning flickered in the distance, painting the sky in cold blue. Daniel lifted his head. Her silhouette glowed against the city lights, radiant and resolute. "You said once, keep everything," she murmured, her eyes on the skyline. "And I did. I kept the lessons, the strength, and the peace you threw away." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Elena, please. I don't even know who I am without you." She studied him for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time you find out," she said gently, turning toward the elevator. As the doors slid open, Daniel remained kneeling, the rain returning soft, cold, relentless. Inside the elevator, Elena pressed the top floor button. Her reflection smiled faintly in the mirrored wall. "Peace," she whispered, "was always the real empire." The city was still half asleep when the first light crept over the skyline. A pale gold sun spilled across the glass towers, setting Aurora's logo aglow. From her office balcony, Elena stood barefoot, coffee in hand, the wind teasing strands of her hair. The night storm had passed, leaving behind a world rinsed clean. Inside, the TV murmured softly, headlines flashing her face, her name, her story. Aurora CEO exposes corruption at gala. Elena Carter Turner, the woman who walked away and won. But she didn't smile at them. She didn't need to. The moment she had once dreamed of, revenge, vindication, power, it was here. Yet what filled her heart wasn't triumph, it was peace. Her voice, calm and steady, flowed like narration over the quiet dawn. "I walked away with nothing they could count, and came back with everything they can't touch." The city glittered below, every building reflecting fragments of her journey, fragments that had once been pain. She saw herself 5 years ago, standing in the rain outside that boutique, divorce papers trembling in her hands. Then, the flickering motel sign that spelled OP, where hope once was. Then Mrs. Carter's kind face offering that first seed fund, and the paper cranes on her old co-working desk, each one a promise folded in silence. The camera of memory moved faster. Deals signed. Nights without sleep. Victories that no one saw. The cracks that once defined her had become the architecture of something unshakable. She turned her gaze eastward, toward the rising sun. The glass wall behind her caught the reflection of the Aurora logo, the word itself glowing like prophecy. Dawn always comes quietly. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message blinked on the screen from Mrs. Carter. Proud of you. Always knew you'd build your own light. Elena smiled softly. It wasn't light I built, she murmured. It was truth. She took a slow sip of coffee. Below, people hurried to work, unaware that the woman in the glass tower had once slept on a motel bed with nothing but a notebook and faith. The camera lingered on her face, serene, strong, human. As she turned to go inside, a single paper crane fluttered from her desk, caught by the morning wind. It drifted over the balcony, circling once before rising toward the sun. Down below, a young woman stopped to pick up the fallen paper crane. She turned it over, reading the faint words written on its wing. Start again. And somewhere in the distance, another story began. Camera lights flared. The studio was alive with quiet tension, the kind that comes before truth is spoken aloud. Elena sat poised in her cream suit, every detail deliberate yet unforced. Across from her sat Diane Moore, veteran journalist and host of The World Speaks. 3, 2, 1, live, the producer whispered. Good evening, Diane began, her tone warm but sharp. Tonight we sit with a woman whose story has redefined strength and integrity, CEO of Aurora Holdings, Miss Elena Carter Turner. Applause filled the air, fading into respectful silence. Elena smiled, calm and radiant under the studio lights. Thank you for having me. Diane leaned forward. The world watched your rise, Miss Turner. From anonymity to leadership. From heartbreak to empire. Tell us, what do you want people to remember about your journey? Elena paused, eyes drifting toward the camera lens, as though she were speaking directly to every woman watching. I want them to remember, she said softly, that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sound of rebuilding. The audience stilled. Even Diane blinked, slightly caught off guard by the weight of the answer. Elena continued, voice gaining quiet strength. There were nights when I thought losing everything meant the end. But I learned something powerful. When you walk away quietly, you give yourself the chance to start again on your own terms. A flashback montage played briefly across the broadcast screen. The rain-soaked night, the motel notebook, Mrs. Carter's mentorship, the gala lights, all stitched into one seamless reflection of resilience. Diane smiled. And now, Aurora Holdings stands as a global symbol of ethical leadership. If you could speak directly to women who are starting over, what would you tell them? Elena's expression softened, but her words landed like stone. Leave quietly if you must, she said, but never stop building loudly inside. The room erupted into applause. A few audience members even stood. Diane nodded, her voice trembling slightly. A message not just for women, but for anyone who has ever been broken and dared to rebuild. The camera zoomed in as Elena looked toward the studio window. The dawn light was breaking outside, the same golden hue that once reflected across her office balcony. The microphone before her gleamed, the voice she once lost, now amplified for the world to hear. As the interview faded to black, the Aurora logo appeared across the screen, dissolving into sunrise. Over the credits, Elena's voice lingered. Every dawn begins in darkness, and every woman who walks away quietly carries the power to build her own light.